signed the midfielder from Sporting Lisbon and is expected to complete a medical today.
I know that we need more goals. I know if we get Bruno over the line, we've got a boy there who's going to score and create.
In golf, Graham McDowell is 4 under par midway through his first round at the Saudi International. The former US Open champion is 2 shots behind clubhouse leader Gavin Green, while Shane Lowry is 1 under par through 8 with Cormac Shavin 3 over through 11. For OTB Sports Radio, I'm Tom Malone.
The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning!
Updates, analysis and opinion across all OTB channels from start to finish.
Gone on it!
I've never seen a team like Ireland before.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio.
All right, good afternoon and welcome along. This is the Off the Ball Six Nations Show, where every game week between now and mid-March we'll be coming to you live across all of our social channels on Off the Ball at offtheball.com and the Go Loud app as well. Thursdays, 12 o'clock every game week. I'll be joined by Cian Treacy of the Irish Independent to look ahead to the weekend's action. Cian, World Cup in the rear-view mirror, new campaign ahead of us, new characters, new protagonists in this Six Nations Championship, and none more front and centre from our point of view anyway than Andy Farrell.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. Was it 4 of the 6 coaches are all new? There's kind of changes even within the Scottish setup. Even this week alone, you know, having Andy Farrell named his team on a Tuesday, it all felt very new. Seeing him front and centre, we didn't always get to hear from Andy Farrell on a game week, and yeah, the messages were all very positive. I think there's a lot to look forward to. It's nice to kind of wipe the slate clean almost from the World Cup, but I was kind of watching back the Scotland game. And it's funny how Ireland started the World Cup campaign against Scotland and everything seemed so right in the world. You know, we were all going well. But yeah, no, it's good to wipe the slate clean. I mean, the team is freshened up somewhat. New voices within the setup, you know, not just Andy Farrell. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, get our teeth stuck into. Yeah, and you mentioned there, obviously, like the start of the World Cup began with that win against Scotland. So is the lesson, regardless of what happens this weekend, don't get too excited either way? That's my New Year's resolution anyway, yeah, was to not buy into this whole sort of positivity maybe around the camp, because even, remember the week of the All Blacks game, you know, the players were so confident, so excited, and the lads who were over in Portugal kind of saying the same thing. So the proof will be in the pudding, but, you know, in terms of what you're looking for to see from Ireland, I don't think anyone is going in expecting to see Ireland win a Grand Slam or anything like that. I think it's just going to be a gradual progress, and if we can see signs of, you know, the game plan evolving, new faces being introduced and ended up playing a key role, I think that would be satisfactory. And you were in part of the warm weather training camp. A few journalists got a bit of warm weather training in as well. I was slogging it away back here, Neil, in the cold like yourself. Typing really quickly outdoors in the heat of Portugal, just really getting used to it. Well, in the heat anyway, as if Japan was anything to go by. So I work better in the Irish climate. Well, we'll be looking ahead to this weekend's games as well. We'll get the thoughts of the opposition as well this week with Cammy Black of the Scottish Rugby Podcast. We'll go through our predictions for the opening weekend and for the tournament itself, and we'll look into the crystal balls of the players to watch out for over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And we'll chat women's and under 26 nations too, as they get their campaigns underway in Donnybrook and Cork respectively. Remember to get your comments into us on YouTube. What do you make of Andy Farrell's first matchday squad? We'll go through it in just a couple of moments. How do you think the tournament is going to go as well? And a reminder, all our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. To start with though, Ireland versus Scotland. Now, as Cian said, usually on a Thursday afternoon we would be talking about what's probably a leaked team in the papers on the Thursday morning. Yeah, bit of a guilty look on your face there as well, but we would be kind of at this stage on a Thursday be awaiting the team selection in around an hour or two. It was normally around the kind of 1-2 o'clock mark. But Andy Farrell, as we said, changed things up. He went for a Tuesday team announcement, showed the hand early, let everyone know we're not afraid, here's the deck we're playing with, and away you go. And here's what he did. We'll go through the team in full for you now. So at fullback, Jordan Larmour. On the wings, you've got Andrew Conway and Jacob Stockdale. A lot of people would have been looking for Andrew Conway to come in off the back of that World Cup campaign. Gary Ringrose and Bundyaki in the centre. Bundyaki getting in ahead of Robbie Henshaw, who's going to be on the bench. Johnny Sexton is fit. He starts at out half alongside Conor Murray, who gets the nod over John Cooney. I suppose controversial enough maybe in some people's minds. We'll get to that though. And then up front, Cian Healy and Tyg Furlong alongside Rob Herring,
who is in for, I suppose, a rare start. Big opportunity for him as well now that Rory Best is retiring. A lot of players will be targeting that number 2 shirt. Then Ian Henderson and James Ryan in the second row. And Caelan Doris, the big selection, that's at number 8, making his international debut. And that means CJ Stander drops over to 6 as opposed to dropping out of the starting team or the matchday squad. Peter O'Mahony is on the bench, and Josh van der Fleer then, as everyone would have expected, wearing the number 7 shirt. On the bench then, a potential debut for Ronan Kelleher of Leinster, Dave Kilcoyne, Andrew Porter, Devon Toner back in the Irish squad as well, and set to add to his 67 caps this weekend. Peter O'Mahony is on the bench alongside John Cooney, Ross Byrne and Robbie Henshaw. The Scotland team came out. We'll go through it with Cammy Black a little bit later on. But the talking points from an Ireland point of view, first off, Caelan Doris starts at number 8. We might talk in the back row as a unit because of what happened with CJ Stander shifting across. But before we go through the rest of that, that's the headline news. What do you make Caelan Doris number 8? Was it, in your mind, a shootout between Doris and Deacon to start number 8?
Yeah, but I think Doris is the man who is ahead. You know, we've seen that in Leinster. Even I think he played 5 of the 6 Champions Cup pool games. The one he missed out on, he was injured, and the game he didn't start, he'd actually been ill that week. So in Leinster, they see him as their first choice, I think, at the moment, with Jack Onan obviously still to come back. I've seen this guy, you know, coming through school, and, you know, there's been such a crop of really exciting players over the last few years. You know, your Andrew Porters, your James Ryans. Caelan Doris was very much another one that you were kind of told, oh, this guy played for the Black Rock team is one to watch, and you go down and you watch him and he's just head and shoulders above everyone else on the pitch. He carried that through for the under-20s, was outstanding. Got a bad hamstring injury actually and was ruled out for the Six Nations, but came back and captained the 20s in the World Cup, and again just stood out as a classy operator. In the
20s team that struggled as well.
In the 20s team that struggled, yeah, exactly. He's super smart. He has this like intuitive nature that he's just in the right place at the right time. I think he obviously broke onto the scene at the end of the 2 years ago when he got his debut against Connacht. Probably worth pointing out for people who don't know, the guy's from Ballina, born and bred, you know, boarded in Blackrock. Both of his parents are from Dublin, but he could have ended up playing for Connacht if, you know, in another world. So Connacht fans probably be cursing their luck. But no, he's very much a Leinster player now. They eyed him as a long way out. But last season when he broke on the scene, I think he had a bit of an issue that a lot of 20s do. Andrew Porter had the same thing. When you break into senior rugby, you just expect to run over lads because that's what you did in underage rugby. So I think he's worked very hard in sort of the contact area. I think he's brought his game to totally new levels altogether this season. Super player. I think he's going to be key to... Like, it's important probably not to expect too much too soon from him, but he just looks like a test match animal. Like, he's going to be ready. I think he's going to be very important to link this sort of... If Ireland are going to play more like Leinster, linking the forwards to the backs. He's a very good link man. He's not going to be like your CJ Stander who's going to run over people. And it's like you mentioned, CJ switching to 6, which I think is a great move because that's his best position. Hopefully, it'd free him up a bit more and allow Caelan Doris then to do what he does best. So I think it's a brilliant decision. If you're good enough, you're old enough, you know that you're not saying. So I'm very excited to see how he goes, and I think the hype around him is very justified.
A lot of people saying he reminds them of Jamie Heaslip around that age in the early 20s bracket. Just the way he kind of carries himself around the pitch, the way he carries the ball.
Yeah, it was funny. I was actually chatting to Jamie Heaslip the other day and I was asking him about this, and he sort of said that, you know, he didn't want to compare himself. But yeah, they are very similar. I think Caelan Doris has probably got a few more strings to his bow. I think he's very skillful on the ball. Jamie Heaslip had that, you know, knack of being in the right place at the right time and probably didn't get the credit he deserved a lot of the time. But I think Caelan Doris has a lot more strings to his bow. He's 21. Like, it is very much a gradual process. He's probably still growing into his frame, but you can see he's got it. And I think he's in a back row, like I mentioned, that it will allow him to thrive. You know, he knows Josh van der Fleer well. So I think it's very exciting to see where this guy goes.
And then obviously the knock-on effect of him starting number 8 means you were probably talking Peter O'Mahony or CJ Stander to play at 6. I'm sure a lot of people might have been talking of Rhys Ruddock maybe a month or so ago before the initial squad was announced. A lot of people surprised that he wasn't there. Is CJ Stander over Peter O'Mahony the right call for you?
I think so, yeah. Like just on Rhys Ruddock, I was shocked as well that he didn't make the squad. I thought he was one of the very few guys who came out of the World Cup campaign, you know, with actually enhanced his reputation. He's been
and carried it through in the Champions Cup.
Going well for Leinster. I mean, you know, we're not privy to the conversation that would happen between Andy Farrell and him, but you'd love to have been a fly on the wall. But yeah, look, I think it is the right decision. I think when you're looking at the back row, you need to find a balance. And like I mentioned, Caelan Doris isn't going to be running over lads in the manner that CJ Stander does. And I think you need a ball carrier there. Josh van der Fleer definitely isn't that type of player. I think if you had someone like Peter O'Mahony, you know, you have that line-out option, but Caelan Doris is a super line-out option as well. I think. Are we going
to see less of CJ Stander carrying, do you think?
No, I think we'll
even more.
No, I think we'll probably see more. But I mean, the pressure probably will be split across with Caelan Doris as well. I think CJ Stander has gotten a lot of unfair criticism. I mean, 6 is probably his best position. I think people. You know, I do think he needs to improve, like, sort of, you know, his footwork in contact and looking to get players involved. But you'd hope this will be the kick he needs. And, you know, Peter O'Mahony coming off the bench, it's an interesting one. The team screams sort of, you know, dynamism, and the bench is kind of a bit interesting. We might get onto that in a while.
Yeah.
Peter O'Mahony doesn't really give you that off the bench, but I think that's more in line with maybe Ronnie Keller, who's going to come off the bench. So it's a big kick in the arse as well for Peter O'Mahony. So maybe that's what these guys need. You know, he doesn't have someone in Munster putting that kind of pressure on him, so you never know. I wouldn't be writing Peter O'Mahony off. Then, you know, he could come back in later in the tournament and have a big say too.
Mm-hmm. The other big call then, a lot of people, probably for the last 6 to 8 weeks, it's been Conor Murray or John Cooney, and people have almost either been in one camp or the other. There have been a few that have kind of floated back and forth in between. In the end, Conor Murray's got it. Is that partly down to the fact that maybe there's a number 8 making his debut as well? You want someone who has that bit more of test level experience behind him, just to kind of help him through it, maybe,
yeah. Like, I mean, I did think John Cooney deserved a start purely because it sends out a positive message that if you play well, you'll get picked. That was my opinion all along. But on the flip side, I can totally see why Andy Farrell went to it. One of the big things under Joe Schmidt, and I guess in any team, is, you know, training, and we don't see how these guys go, how they operate, you know, within the squad, even off the pitch as well. This is the second Irish head coach, you know, who hasn't picked John Cooney. So maybe there is something behind the scenes that we're not seeing. If you were to take it on face value, absolutely, he deserved a start. But again, people are writing Conor Murray off as if, like, you know, he's doomed. The guy is only 30. Andy Farrell trusts him a lot. He's been on 2 Lions tours with him. By all accounts, he's been flying in training, and he's playing with better players now as well. You know, he's in a struggling Munster team, which, you know, isn't going to get the best out of himself. You can imagine him if he was playing with Leinster, let's say, you know, he'd be looking even better. So, and you know, you have that link with Sexton as well. Who knows? You know, Sexton is the captain now. He might have had a say in who plays alongside him too. So, look, I think Conor Murray knows he's under pressure. Absolutely no doubt about it. I think we'll probably see John Cooney playing more of a role than he has done. Like, he was
more than the sub scrum half, like more than what Luke McGrath would have been given, because there had been, over the last few years, a pattern where Conor Murray was kind of coming off, unless the game was done and dusted. Conor Murray was staying on for 70 plus minutes.
Remember that game in Cardiff where he was carrying his shoulder and Joe Schmidt left him on? Like, it was just such a bad look for not having trust in your other scrum half. So I think John Cooney will play more of a role. We've seen him with Ulster, how electric he is, you know, with the line breaks and stuff. Probably something that Conor Murray doesn't do, but I still think Conor Murray's overall game is more rounded than John Cooney's, and I'm expecting him to have a big tournament.
Cooney kind of alongside the kind of Sean Cronin role, where he would have been coming on 50, 60 minutes when a few players might have been tiring, the game is loosening up a bit. I actually think I probably would have started John Cooney, but also as well the prospect of him coming on maybe an hour on the clock, you know, the game is loosening up a little bit. I think he's actually a perfect player to be able to bring on, just the sheer energy he brings around the pitch as well.
Yeah, I agree, and you know, and Conor Murray knows that as well, and it's a big show of faith from Andy Farrell that if Conor Murray does not go well this week, I think you could easily see John Cooney starting against Wales next week. And look, that's exactly the competition you want. Under Joe Schmidt, it wasn't really like that. You know, you sort of knew the team from a long way out, unless barring injuries. So I would have liked to have seen Cooney start. That's my overall point in this. But I think writing Conor Murray off prematurely is just so wrong that he could easily turn it on here and prove a lot of people wrong, because a lot of people have been writing him off.
OK, there's still loads more to talk about from an Irish point of view, but Cammy Black of the Scottish Rugby Podcast is on the line. Before we start with Cammy, I'll just quickly run through the Scotland team in full, because they've handed out one debut. Gregor Townsend is starting, Edinburgh's number 8. Nick Haining in the back row. In full, they go with Stuart Hogg at full back as captain, Sean Maitland and Blair Kinghorn on the wings, Hugh Jones and Sam Johnson in the centre, with Adam Hastings starting in the big Finn Russell-shaped hole at out half, alongside Ali Price at scrum half. Rory Sutherland, Fraser Brown and Xander Fagerson make up the front row. Scott Cummings and Johnny Gray in the second row, with Jamie Ritchie and Hamish Watson alongside Nick Haining at number 8. So Cammy Black is with us this afternoon. Cammy, afternoon, how are you?
I'm not too bad, much better than I was this time last week.
Well, I suppose on this time last week, so, you know, not to remind you, but the World Cup was a complete disaster. Then on and off the pitch, with everything that happened with the potential postponed game against Japan. Then everyone about a month or so ago gets very angry about, you know, the directors getting pay raises at Scottish Rugby as well. And just when you think, okay, the Six Nations is around the corner, we're ready to go, we can start thinking about rugby again, Finn Russell almost literally says, "Hold my beer," and here we are. What's the last week been like for a Scottish rugby fan?
A mixture of stressful and very exciting. I mean, it's nice to have the drama of it as well. You know, it's given us something to talk about. The team are talking as though it hasn't been a distraction. I think they're probably a bit more isolated from it than they might have been in previous years. But from a fan's point of view, it's actually, well, certainly from someone that's trying to build a following on social media, it's been wonderful for producing content, but I'm not sure it's been great for the nerves.
So what do we know from the Finn Russell situation? Obviously, we heard they'd come into camp in Edinburgh. Finn Russell had gone out, had some drinks, didn't train the following day, and then there was the standoff with Gregor Townsend. Obviously, it seems like two very, very stubborn guys. There's, like, Cian, there's a real Roy Keane, Mick McCarthy, Saipan thing here. Probably on maybe a slightly smaller scale. Cammy, I don't know, are you familiar with our great sporting civil war between Roy Keane and Mick McCarthy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure at this point that it is going to be on a smaller scale. It remains to be seen what happens and how this plays out over the rest of the tournament. We've got conflicting stories about what actually happened. We know that Finn Russell was drinking in the hotel. We know he was the only one drinking in the hotel. What differs is whether or not he left of his own accord or was asked to leave. We know he didn't turn up on the Monday, but again, he just played a game of rugby down in London on the Sunday, so whether or not he was expecting to be there, again, we don't know. Townsend said he had a very productive conversation with him and seemed surprised that he went back to Racing to play at the weekend. So who knows? I mean, Townsend said he hasn't spoken to him since, so that's a bit concerning. Finn Russell's gone off on holiday for a couple of days to Dubai, which it seems an odd choice, but, you know, he's got the time off, so fair play to him. So at the moment, I don't really see any end to this, and it's probably likely to rumble on. It seems unlikely he'll be back for the England match, I would have thought.
Yeah, and obviously that presents a pretty difficult situation because, like, has it just kind of exacerbated everything? The fact that he went back to Racing, played at the weekend, and he kind of, you know, he played up to the cameras with the shirt off, flexing the muscles. He really made it the Finn Russell show at the weekend. And if there was a potential to build a bridge between himself and Gregor Townsend, it does look like he went some way towards burning it.
Possibly, although I think some of the rumours swirling around, and certainly there's a suggestion that things haven't been well between Russell and Townsend for a while now. So whether or not bridges have already been burned, we don't know at this stage. Certainly there's a suggestion that there is some support and sympathy within camp for Finn Russell. I think Ali Price had liked a couple of the Simon Zebo tweets when Simon Zebo was stirring the pot. But subsequently unliked them and deleted his tweets. So whether or not he was given a telling off in camp, we don't know. But I think that it's not just Finn Russell. There has been things leaking out of camp that maybe all's not well. There's one former international said that he was pleased he wasn't going back into camp with Gregor Townsend again. We had Ian Morrison saying over the weekend he'd spoken to a parent of a player about their experience in the World Cup and said that they'd had a miserable time of it. So I don't think this is just a Gregor Townsend, Finn Russell issue. I think it goes deeper than this. Whether or not Townsend can turn it around, I think, remains to be seen.
And what is it about Townsend that seems to be rubbing players up the wrong way? Because he obviously came in from Glasgow, had done incredibly well at Glasgow, and came in with a huge reputation. And it did seem at the time like this was the move that was going to bring Scotland forward, and it just hasn't materialised.
There's a suggestion, again, it was the same article at the weekend that came out in Scotland, that the issues with Gregor Townsend are similar to the ones Ireland had with Joe Schmidt that have come out recently, that there's a lot of micromanagement going on. We know John Barkley said previously about Gregor Townsend having these really huge playbooks that he gives to players in advance with lots of detail. And Finn Russell, we know, is the kind of player that likes to go out and express himself and do his own thing. So clearly that's going to create a conflict if Gregor Townsend is dictating every single thing the players are doing on the pitch. And that puts them under a lot of pressure to, not being able to adapt to what's in front of them and having to wait for the instructions to come down from on high as to what to do next. So I think that's where the conflict's coming from.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think everything you hear is that Gregor Townsend models himself off Joe Schmidt. I know they were very close before he got the Scotland job, in terms of sharing ideas and stuff like that. And it's sort of no surprise that Finn Russell and Simon Zebo are almost kindred spirits in that sense. They're both off in racing, living the high life in Paris. Basically going out and being told to do what you like. But I think there's no doubt, Cammy, that he's a massive loss to Scotland. But I think it's a slightly blown out of proportion in that it doesn't matter if Dan Carter is playing out half for Scotland at the weekend if the front five don't show up, because we saw that at the World Cup, didn't we? So I just wanted to get your thoughts on sort of, do you think that this Scottish pack actually have it within them to give Adam Hastings a platform in which he can play?
It's interesting. I mean, the comments that have just come out from Gregor Townsend in the last hour when the squad's been announced are really interesting. When he's talking about resilience, and I think the words he used is, "We must be a relentless collective," which I thought was wonderful management speak. And I think that's what Scotland have lacked in the past, is that kind of relentlessness and that grit and determination in getting, front foot and really fronting up to, a pack like Highlands. And Townsend talked about going away. He was talking on the official SRU podcast about the review he did after the World Cup, and he'd gone and spoken to Jim Telfer. And we know what kind of coach Jim Telfer was, and we know what kind of man he still is. And you can imagine that he put a flea in Gregor Townsend's ear about toughening the forwards up. And I think I was in Manchester for the Glasgow Sale match, and you could really see Scott Cummings and Johnny Gray, I think, as a combination at lock, are really aggressive, really physical. Johnny Gray's really kind of changed his game. He carries much harder than he has done in the past. Scott Cummings, I think, is a real talent. He's got 8 caps to his name, but he was one of the standout players, I think, for Scotland in the World Cup. I think the front three, Xander Ferguson does very good in the loose. He gets, he gets too drawn into the afters, I think, or we call it the Zand bags on our podcast. In terms of the scrum, I've got worries about that for the forwards, but we are, the cupboard is bare as far as front row forwards go in Scotland. I think we've got depth at hooker, but at loose head and tight head, we're struggling.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love the idea, actually, of just get Jim Telfer in there give him a week, give him 10 days in camp, and just run the absolute dog out of the players for 10 days, rocking sessions 2-3 times a day. Like, nothing elaborate in terms of scrums and lineouts or actual game plan, but just absolutely just bury them for a week.
Because that's what Scotland have been missing. They've been missing that sort of dog, because Ireland went into that game in the World Cup and knew that if they won the battle up front, that they would win the game, and that's what it proved. And even I remember the second half, it started lashing rain, and Scotland just never looked like scoring. I think, Gregor Townsend is under massive pressure, I think, this year. I remember being over in Japan and, talking to a few Scottish journalists, and they were sort of wondering if, he'd kind of walk away after the World Cup. They brought in Peter de Villiers, obviously, and Steve Tandy as well. I mean, what's been the word on how they've been going, Cammy?
There's not been much, really. There was a suggestion that the choice of Rory Sutherland at loosehead is actually down to Peter de Villiers. So his role is going to be quite interesting, because he's kind of in on a consultancy basis, because Danny Wilson's going to Glasgow Warriors at the end of the season. So I wonder whether or not this is almost like a prolonged job interview for him to come in and eventually take on that role full time. He's very highly regarded. Same with Steve Tandy. I think the interesting thing is Scotland in the past with the coaches have looked from within. That they've done these worldwide searches for the best in the world, and surprisingly found that an ex-player can be promoted to a coaching role very cheaply. But what's impressive, they've brought in Steve Tandy. Did very well as defence coach at the Waratahs. Very highly thought of. Same with Peter de Villiers, very highly thought of forwards coach. So it's promising how quickly coaching team have been able to gel and how well they've been able to communicate what they want out of the players within the short time they've had, I don't know. I think Ireland probably have a bit more continuity from a coaching point of view. Steve Tandy's maybe a bit of an unknown quantity, so we might have the element of surprise in defence. But that's the best I think we can hope for at this stage.
Is there any danger with a bad Six Nations, Cammy, that Gregor Townsend's job actually comes under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny?
I think so. I think if Scotland don't win at least 2 games, I think that's probably it for Gregor Townsend. I think he's probably taken them as far as he can at that stage. It sounds like he's trying to find a plan B. He's trying to, he's moving away from this idea of we do nothing but play a quick brand of rugby, but we're going to try and find a bit of dog and a bit of fight in us as well. How well that works and how well he's able to instill that in the players with the coaching team remains to be seen. If he can do it, if he can get a couple of wins, we need the win away against Italy. Although knowing Scotland will lose to a last-minute drop goal from Sergio Parisse, that would be a very Scottish way to lose to Italy. I think our home games are particularly difficult this year. We have got a very poor away record, so it's not looking good as we go into the tournament. Normally we go into tournaments with some hope in our hearts, but it's hard to see where it's coming from. So I think a bad Six Nations, and I don't see Townsend surviving.
Is there still the general kind of feeling around Scotland that on a given day they are capable of beating and losing to pretty much absolutely anyone out there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look through the team, and I think on any day, most of the players, bar perhaps the loose head and tight head, could go toe to toe with any player in the Northern Hemisphere. I think ability wise, skill wise, it's there. I think what Scotland lacking is that mental toughness, and we talked about it before on our podcast that it's really a mentality thing that it comes down to. That's where the point of difference is, I think, with teams like Ireland and Wales, is they have that resilience and that mental toughness. We saw against England, you're up in the last 3 minutes. I think the clock's gone red, and Fraser Brown gets turned over goes for the ball and gets a penalty awarded, and all of a sudden that's a draw. And that's the silly mistakes that Scotland make time and time again. They put themselves in positions to win games and then shoot themselves in the foot.
Tell me a bit about Nick Haining, the number 8, making his debut this weekend. For those that wouldn't really know much about him, what type of a player he is, what's his background, what are we expecting to see from this weekend?
He's kind of come from nowhere. He played for Western Force through their academy. He actually played on the wing against the Lions in 2013. He was marking Sean Maitland. I'd almost given up on professional rugby, but he sent out a highlights reel. It got picked up by Jersey Reds, made his way to Bristol, and Richard Cockrell saw something he liked and brought him up to Edinburgh this season. He's got a Scottish granny from Dundee, as is tradition with any Southern Hemisphere player that comes to play for Scotland. They all got to find a Scottish granny. But he's 6'4", he's 18 stone. I think he said himself, he's surprised himself how well he's done since coming to Edinburgh. He has spoken very highly of the impact that Richard Cockrell has had on his career. And I was speaking to Sandy, who does our podcast with us, who follows Edinburgh a lot more closely than I do, and he said actually he would put Nick Haining on his day above Big Bill Matter in terms of Edinburgh's first choice number 8. He has a more rounded game than Bill Matter. He carries a little bit harder. His passing, he hasn't got the Hollywood offloads maybe, but he passes very well. He runs hard. He puts his head in places that he's got no business putting it, which I think's led to the injuries. He has been unlucky with injuries at the start of the season, but when he has played, he's played very well. He's been preferred at 8 to Magnus Bradbury by Richard Cockrell, so he's probably, week in, week out competing for Bill Matter for that number 8 spot.
And is he one of these players then that kind of got the opportunity during the World Cup when others were away to come in and put down a marker? We would have seen it in Ireland with a number of players this season. Caelan Doris, John Cooney being 2 prime examples. Was he one of those players that got the opportunity, or has he just kind of consistently been good and been thereabouts all season?
I think he's had the opportunity. I think most Edinburgh fans would say when he was signed, it was very much, here's a player that's coming in to fill that gap during the World Cup, and he'll come in and he'll do a job, but by the time the guys come back from the World Cup, he'll be, there as cover. But he really stepped up to the mark. Has played week in, week out. I think, Magnus Bradbury struggled to get back in as number 8 and has been playing more at 6. So no, he really sees the opportunity with both hands. And I think it's surprised. I mean, I think he himself has kind of admitted in interviews it surprised him as much as anyone how well he's done.
So if Scotland are to get a result this weekend over at the Aviva Stadium, like, where are they going to target Ireland? Aside from, like, delaying the bus or anything like that.
It was interesting. I was thinking about this and I was looking back at the World Cup match. I think Ireland had 63% possession. I think if Scotland want to look at a way to beat Ireland, they need to look at the way Glasgow played against Leinster in April last year. That win away at Leinster where they didn't have the territory, they didn't have the possession, but they defended really well for long periods. And when they got the chance, they executed it and they scored points when they were in position to do so. I think it was ridiculous. Something like 300-odd tackles Glasgow made that day to 160 Leinster tackles. Johnny Gray was initially recorded as doing 40 and then that got upgraded to 43, having missed none. That's the kind of performance Scotland are going to have to put in. They have to go in there knowing that they're going to be under pressure for long periods of the game. And when they get the opportunity to score points, they're going to have to take it. I mean, we saw that last 2 years ago in Dublin, where I don't think that score necessarily reflected Scotland's performance on that day. But when Scotland put themselves in position to score, they made silly passes and made the wrong decision.
Yeah, like that was a common feature. I think in a lot of Ireland games 2 years ago when they won the Grand Slam key, and that they didn't dominate teams for 80 minutes in almost any, probably aside from Italy, really. But you look
England
at that Wales
in the first
game.
half was pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
but they picked their moments.
Yeah.
And it was the Wales game and the Scotland game in particular, I thought, where there were actually large stages of that game where they looked average enough. They didn't look fantastic, but it was the crucial points. They dominated the kind of last 10 minutes, first 10 minutes of first half, second half, and just struck at the right times.
Yeah, I suppose even Jacob Stockdale's intercept try at the end of the Wales game, it was all a false sense of security, Neil. That's why the World Cup.
Exactly.
That's why the World Cup.
The scorers, they were coming in flurries. Yeah. They obviously targeted these pockets of games.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, they did play some good rugby as well, obviously, to win a Grand Slam. I mean, I thought that 40 minutes against England was probably the best 40 minutes that Ireland played under Joe Schmidt, but that probably raised everyone's expectations going to Japan, and that didn't end up too well, did it? No,
certainly didn't. Cammy, before we leave you go, in terms of this weekend, what is the head telling you? What's the gut telling you?
It's almost like Schrodinger's cat. Until the kick-off, I have no idea whether Scotland's chances are dead in a box or we have hope. Heart says that we can go out and we can keep to within a score of Ireland and maybe even nick something. My head's saying it's going to be a long day at the office.
And overall, for a tournament point of view, what way are you thinking?
It's difficult. I've never found it so hard to call a Six Nations for Scotland in the last few seasons.
I think we've said that every year now, in fairness.
Probably. I've always had some hope. I think this is the first Six Nations I've gone into where there's only a tiny bit of hope. I think if everybody shows up, then if we can leave with our heads held high, having remained within a score and being competitive throughout 80 minutes with every team, and we beat Italy away, that will constitute an okay Six Nations for Scotland.
All right, Cammy, been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a million for joining us here on Off the Ball Six Nations show, and enjoy the game of the weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks very much.
So that was Cammy Black there of the Scottish Rugby Blog podcast. Interesting, he was talking about the Scottish forwards needing the bit of dog in them, because we're actually going to play a little clip here. Brian O'Driscoll was on yesterday on Off the Ball, and it's exactly what he was talking about, that what Ireland need is just the pack needing a bit more fight, a bit more grunt about them.
I saw you made an interesting observation this week. You were doing various media bits and pieces, and you said the Irish pack could do with a bit more dog. So where does this selection, where does it rank in your dog ratings?
Not very high. I haven't played with all of these guys, and you get a better sense of what people are like, more so at training and their attitudes to kicking lumps out of one another versus the opposition. It's easy to raise yourself, physically and mentally for, playing international teams, but sometimes it's the attitude that you see at training is the one that copper fastens an opinion as to whether someone's got animal or, that animal or got that dog in them. And I guess I just don't really see it. I don't see too many nasty guys. Definitely not in the second row. Two great athletes, but they're not guys that throw their weight around. The back row, they'll stand up, to something thrown at them. But are they going out? Are they the aggressors? I don't really think so. So, listen, maybe there's not as much of a necessity for it, but I always liked it as a marker of someone that when you're going into battle, that a guy to lead you and to weigh in behind, because they're not going to take a backward step. And I made it in reference to a few guys, Dennis Leaney and Sean O'Brien in particular. Paul O'Connell was another one, just that were ready for the fight. And if you look at successful teams, you look at that South African pack of the second rows that they had of Etzebeth. Then they had Mostart coming off the bench, and what's his name from Snyman, who's a man mountain, who's got skills as well. They just look huggish. For Mullen at 8, they just really they want aggro. They're the sort of people you want to partner up with and see giving you quality possession, because they're there for the fight, and that's what international rugby is about. It's a fight first and foremost, a physical fight, playing within the rules, but trying to push the boundaries as much as you can. And nice teams rarely get very far. I just would love to see one or two other individuals that can throw their weight around a bit more.
Is that right, Brian O'Driscoll? There, Ireland just need a bit more nastiness about them?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, I think you'd like to see, particularly in the second row, you'd like to see a bit more. I was over in Treviso a couple of weeks ago for the Leinster game, and James Ryan showed a bit of it, actually. Did give away a couple of soft penalties which were unlike him, but he was getting in lads' faces, and I don't know.
Is it actually maybe the one thing
he's too
maybe
nice.
Hasn't brought a little bit, like, obviously he carries brilliantly, he makes lots of tackles, he's a brilliant line-out operator, he is an all-round kind of player, but if there was one thing maybe for him to work on, is it maybe actually just getting in the face of players a little bit more, throwing his weight around a bit more?
Probably, yeah. And like I said, he was doing it in Treviso, and it wasn't something I've seen him doing that often. I mean, he does everything else so well, but we have such high expectations of James Ryan for everything that, these are just a couple of nuts and bolts, so that I think he can add to his game. I think even Ian Henderson, for me, he really needs to be a bit more aggressive. I think we talked about lads kind of being lucky to get into team maybe, but I think he's on very thin ice, I think, as well. Devin Toner is, returned to form, and I think Ian Henderson is just wildly inconsistent with his form. I mean, he was actually brilliant in that Scotland game in the World Cup, and then for the rest, we just didn't really see him. And the most frustrating thing is that he has the quality, he has the skills. He's taken on the Ulster captaincy this season, but he's got a lot of responsibility within the Irish team now as well. He's part of that leadership group which Andy Farrell has mixed up, which is quite interesting as well. So I'd love to see a little bit more from Ian Henderson on a consistent basis, because he's such a quality operator when he plays well.
And the collisions obviously were huge in the World Cup, but you look at the pack on paper, it's a very, very strong pack. Cian Healy's there, Tadhg Furlong is there, Henderson Ryan, Stander is there as well. These are big guys. These are really, really physical players.
Yeah.
On paper, it looks like they should have absolutely no problem getting into it, winning those collisions, getting over gain lines, and putting a bit of the bully into the team.
Yeah, and I think even you look at the two props, the gap between the lads who are behind him, Dave Kilcoyne and Andrew Porter, has never been as close. I think Andrew Porter has really narrowed the gap there. You look at Rob Herring. Rob Herring is having a very good season for Ulster. I'd have a few issues about his line-out throwing. That's what I mean about Ian Henderson has a lot of responsibility. I'd be very curious to know. Might find out later today at the Ireland press conference whether James Ryan might take on the calling responsibility, because he had started doing it for Leinster when Devin Toner was out injured. So I think that'll be interesting to watch. But even someone like Ronan Keller, probably he can definitely be that abrasive guy as well, but we'll see how he gets on off his debut. But yeah, you're right, there is enough on paper, there is enough grunt in this pack that I think Andy Farrell is probably the man to get that out of him as well. We hear so much about how much of a motivator he is, like how players love playing for him. We've all seen his famous speeches on the Lions tour, so I think he can get an extra tune out of these guys. But the likes of Cian Healy and Tadhg Furlong, they've been trucking along well for Leinster, but I think that this is a big, with the gaps so narrow, there's a big sort of chance for them to step it up a notch too.
On Cian Healy, we're going to get into the 4-year cycle in a second, because obviously everyone have been talking about let's blood as many young players as possible, get them working throughout the 4 years, really build a team over this consistent period. And now we're going to have the World Cup draw towards the end of the year, so you do obviously need results now. But just to go back to the 4-year plan for just a second, because we spoke about Cian Healy there, loosehead prop. I actually think the loosehead prop for Ireland is probably the most crucial position over this next 4 years. I would say that, obviously. I would say that. But no, just hear me out on this one. The age profile of Cian Healy, Jack McGrath and Dave Kilcoyne, obviously they're all in that kind of 29 to 31 bracket at the moment. Or is Cian Healy even 32 now?
Yeah.
So they're all in that. Like, by the time the next World Cup comes around, all three of them are going to be either kind of 33 to 36. We do know props can go a little bit longer, but you look at maybe Cian Healy and Dave Kilcoyne, so much of their game is on explosiveness. Is that something they might lose over the next few years? And the point I'm trying to make then is someone over these next 4 years across the 4 provinces has to seriously put their hand up, because there's a handful of guys down there that are in the early and mid-20s. Eric O'Sullivan at Ulster, Jeremy Lockman and Liam O'Connor at Munster. Even Connacht at the moment. Dennis Buckley's probably just got, age-wise, he's probably just missed his chance. They've been going with Paddy McAllister a lot as well. He's probably higher up on that age bracket as well. And then at Leinster, Peter Dooley as well is playing very, very well. And Ed Byrne is also a player that can seriously put their hand up. So there's an opportunity there for a handful of guys to seriously put a hand up over the next few years.
I was wondering, were you going to mention one guy? Could I give you my theory?
Yeah.
I think we're going to see Andrew Porter switch back eventually. Yeah, I really do. I was
thinking of I don't want to see it.
I think it's going to happen. I really do, because I think someone like David Nucifora is going to be looking at this now for the World Cup. And you're right, loosehead is an issue. This guy was immense.
But like, it's not an immediate issue. That's the thing, because you at the moment you actually have 3 guys that are playing really, really well and are on a world-class level and can absolutely hold a scrum for you, can contribute around the pitch, but it's maybe a few years down the line.
Yeah.
On Porter, I think, I just like the idea that at tight end you have Furlong and Porter, and that for 80 minutes you're pretty much going to have an absolutely brilliant tight head prop there. And if you put Porter across back over to loose, do you really have to work hard to develop a number 2 tight head?
But possibly, it's a fair point. But I mean, if the tight head, or if the loose head, in your opinion, is such an important role, would you not rather spread the wealth almost? I mean,
well, it's not necessarily that the role is important. I just think it's one of those positions where you have the top 3 in the depth chart are all of a certain age, where they could all still be playing very, very well come the next World Cup, but there is a chance that their level might have dropped off by
and
then.
With all those guys, you don't have that explosive element. Well, definitely, whatever about now, Cian Healy is definitely still capable of it now, but in 4 years, it's a lot to ask for, to have that explosive element. So that's why I would like to see Andrew Porter moving back, maybe even in a year or two. It's interesting, John Fogarty now has gone in as scrum coach to Ireland. He was the one who sort of, helped him develop into a tight head. So, but I wonder, is he going to start going maybe now? And obviously a lot will depend on what Porter wants to do as well. His body shape has had to change to do it, but I always got the impression that he preferred it on the loose because he's able to get on the ball more. He's able to have such a big impact. He was another guy at the 20s. I mentioned him earlier that you heard, and he was just running over lads for fun when you got it. So it'll be interesting because he's had to work so hard, because everyone's, I wouldn't have a clue what goes on in the front row. I bow to your knowledge, but everyone talks about how difficult it was to switch from the loose to the tight. He's had to work so hard now, but I do still think he's capable. I mean, he covered Loosehead on the bench.
I think he's absolutely. I think if tomorrow morning he sat down and said, I want to be a loosehead again, I think he'd have absolutely no problem over a certain period of time getting back up to speed on things, and I think he'd be absolutely fantastic there. I would like to keep that depth at tight head.
It's definitely, I can see the value of both, but I mean, not to get it. I know we might talk about the World Cup cycle thing, but I mean, if you were to start a World Cup in 2023 with a front row of Andrew Porter, Ronan Kelleher and Tadhg Furlong, that's pretty tasty.
Yeah. The other fear then I'd have is if he does start working towards being a loosehead again, like, how much time does he have to wait in the wings to behind someone like Cian Healy, behind Dave Kilcoyne? He could be waiting a long time to get back in there again.
It's true, because like I mentioned, he has closed the gap. He's had to work so hard, but
like, he's getting close to Tadhg Furlong.
Yeah, but I think Tadhg Furlong, he's just looked knackered over the last while. He's played so much rugby with the Lions as well. I think he's not great. He's only 26, 27.
27.
Like, so he's got a second wind in him, to come back as well. So it's a good headache to have.
Right. 4-year cycles, that's what we're going to talk about now, because obviously the World Cup draw is coming up towards the end of the year. The idea that let's just throw everyone out there, let's give all the kids a chance, let's just play the 20s out there. Who wants a cap? You can have a cap, you can have a cap. that's obviously gone out the window now because you need to get results. We've seen back in the 2015 World Cup how missing out on that top 2 seed at the very least can absolutely screw you over. Okay, well, it didn't actually screw England over in the end. They were in the top 2, but you end up in a difficult pool, and things get very, very tough from there.
Yeah, and like I think we're very obsessed, and I've been guilty of it as well, with 4-year cycles. I mean, let's look at what South Africa did in 2 years. Now, I know like the resources that they had, and they had a seriously good team, but Rassie Erasmus came in, you know, very late in the day there and changed that around. So it just shows that you don't have to be really obsessed with 4-year cycles. The idea that Ireland were going to start a Six Nations with 5 or 6 in the starting team, uncapped players, is just absolute rubbish. This has got to be a slow process, but I think, you know, we've got to look closer at more 2 to 3 years, because let's face it, the whole 4-year cycle thing hasn't gotten us very far.
Exactly, yeah.
And also, like, these guys are human beings. Like, I mean, we're talking now about, you know, the front row in 4 years' time. 4 years is a very, very long time.
And I think as well, if you are looking so far ahead, if you start picking a team this weekend with 4 years in mind, you could promote players maybe a little bit before they're ready, and maybe in a year or two's time, you're just starting to realise, okay, they're actually just maybe not up to the level, and they're just not going to kick on. And maybe at that stage, have you kind of committed to the fact that, no, I chose that player, he's going to be in there. I like the idea of, over the course of the first maybe 2 years of the cycle, here or there, to introduce players bit by bit and have the guys around them. You know, there could be players like, for example, I'd be surprised maybe, but like, you know, Conor Murray, CJ Stander, Cian Healy, as we were mentioning, people like that, even bringing back Devin Toner at his age. There's a fair chance some of those guys mightn't be around in 4 years' time for a World Cup, but there's no reason to get rid of them now, because what they can actually do to improve a younger player in the first few years of a World Cup cycle, and obviously give themselves a chance of getting there as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's what people have to remember. I mean, let's take Devin Toner, for example. You know, some people might go, like I mentioned, I actually thought he deserved to start if we're going on form, and some people might go, what's the point in starting Devin Toner, because he's not going to be there in France 2023. But I mean, why he's there is because he's, number one, he's definitely worth his place. It was a terrible decision for him not to be brought to the World Cup. We won't go over that again. But I mean, someone like Ronan Kelleher this season has been playing outstanding rugby, but he's also been playing with Devin Toner in the team all week, because we were talking about that World Cup period while, you know, all the frontliners were away. Kelleher got the chance to play, like, you know, I know he played a couple of games last season, but it was his first proper breakthrough with the best
starting week in, week out.
With the best line-out, you know, operator in the country right now. So they're the kind of things that Andy Farrell is looking at now. It's the same with Peter O'Mahony, and he mentioned this week how good he's been with the younger guys. You know, Caelan Doris, he's going to be a line-out jumper as well. I'm sure O'Mahony is passing on a few tips to him as well. So it's got to be a slower process rather than let's throw all these new guys in and hope in 4 years' time that, number one, they're going to be fit, and number two, that they're going to be in great form. It's just not going to work like that.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree as well. Right, we'll move on because we actually are running out of time ever so slightly. Women's and under-20s also kicking off this weekend. The women's team playing Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock against Scotland over in Donnybrook. It's just been difficult the last few years. Fifth last season was really, really disappointing. Just one win. And I don't know, it actually just feels like for a few years now we've been saying we're in a transition period. You know, we're blooding the players in. We need to be thinking long term. But while you're thinking long term, all of a sudden, day by day, France and England are just pulling further and further ahead. And I mean further ahead. If you look back maybe 3-4 years ago, at probably before the last Women's World Cup, which was on in Ireland, when there was a lot of excitement still about the women's team. They were performing really, really, really well. In the end, didn't live up to expectations at the World Cup because the expectation had been so high. And to see how far ahead France and England have gone away from them over those last few years is frightening, because for quite a while they were the big three in that Six Nations. Yeah,
and I suppose the reason, for anyone who doesn't know, that they've pulled so far ahead is that the unions have given, you know, like professional contracts. English players are now back on them again. Look, it must be so tough for the Ireland players to come into camp. I know, like, it's great to represent your country, but it must be so soul-destroying to know that, like, these two teams are just operating on another level. Like, Ireland have got a lot of good players in. You know, Adam Griggs has got a couple of years now under his belt working with them. They had a good win against Wales a couple of weeks ago in the warm-up win, in a warm-up game. So, look, you know, we've got to see a little bit more. I mean, if we're leaving those two teams aside, you've got to be targeting a win against Scotland, Wales and Italy. They've got a lot of good players. I mean, someone like Emer Considine has really grown in. They've taken a lot of players from GA backgrounds. She's one of them. She used to play for Clare. Got a lot of young players like Baveen Parsons and that. So it's about gelling it all together, but it's very, very tough ask. But I mean, as starts go this weekend, they should be going into it, pretty optimistic about what they can achieve.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you've got Philip Doyle coming back to Ireland. So it's a nice little narrative to go in it as well.
To go. Yeah, he did obviously such great work for the women's team, so there'll be no love lost there. You want to get one over, I'd say.
Absolutely as well. And then Friday night, so that's Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock in Energia Park in Donnybrook. Then Friday night, so tomorrow evening at Irish Independent Park, 7:15 p.m. kickoff is the under-20s. I like how in the last couple of years now they've kind of made Cork the home for the under-20s. They've made Energia Park the home for the women's teams, rather than when they had previously maybe like been out in Ashburn or touring around the place. It kind of feels like, I'd say for a lot of rugby fans in Cork as well, there's just a nice connection, and you probably have a better chance of drawing in a bigger crowd consistently putting those teams on in the same place.
Yeah, like I covered the 20s every year, and I was down at all the games in Cork last year, and it was honestly brilliant. It was a really, really great atmosphere. And it should be said, the women have kind of done that in Donnybrook too. It's the women's games, very family feel, but like Irish Independent Park, it became an intimidating place for people to go because it is such a closed pitch. It's on top of you, but
we're getting good crowds as well.
Huge crowds, sold out crowds. Now, they were playing great rugby. Obviously, the team were going well, but there's no reason to say that this year's team won't play great rugby too. I mean, they've got 7 players back from last year.
It is always such a hard one to call the year on year, because you might have seen a lot of the players, but at the same time,
it's so cyclical.
They're all coming together. It's so cyclical. Just because you had a good team last year doesn't really actually mean anything.
Of course it doesn't. But the one thing I would say is like that, and I was down in Fode Island when they were at their camp last week chatting to a few of them. They've seen what these guys have done, and let's say like Ryan Baird and Craig Casey, like they've gone on like to bigger and better things, and they were only on the team last year, so that is huge motivation for these guys, and they've got a lot of quality players in that team this year too.
Okay, now we are running out of time. We decided we'd pick our 6 players each to watch in the tournament. We picked one from each team. Very quickly, I'm going to go through my selections. You can see him on the screen. For Ireland, I went with CJ Stander, particularly just the fact that he's playing 6th this year. Now, some of these were tough as well because we're going through these before teams were named. I went for Lewis Ludlam with England. It looks like Tom Curry is actually going to be playing number 8. I was hoping to see Lewis Ludlam actually get a run at number 8 for England.
I was hoping to see Ben Earl.
Were you?
I'd Ben Earl for that reason.
That's the way we're thinking as well. I think there's a nice bit of dog about Lewis Ludlam, the way he carries, particularly the way he carries. There's just a real grunt about him. That's something I really wanted to see. Who else do we have then as well? France. Initially, I had actually picked Thomas Ramos when I went through these last week and looking at the teams. And just in typical French fashion as well, Thomas Ramos ended up getting dropped from the squad. I cannot believe how he isn't in a French squad.
There's just no point in trying to understand.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's just no point in trying to understand.
So I went for Demba Bamba in the end.
He's quality.
There's touch and go whether or not he's actually going to be fit to play this weekend. But I think if he is back over the course of the tournament, over the tournament, not just this weekend. Wales, I went for Louis Rees-Zammit. I don't know, did I just take that from you?
Well, I just picked someone else because I knew everyone would go for him. He's obviously sensational. Can't wait to see how he goes.
Yeah, I would have seen him playing. I was doing commentary with Connacht and Gloucester over in Kingsholm in the Champions Cup. He was just electric. There was just anytime he got the ball, you could sense there was something about him. And actually, the next man as well was along those lines. Another Gloucester man for Italy, Jake Pelledri, who he carries unbelievably. Yeah. He is a vicious ball carrier. He's absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait to see a bit more of him. English-born, qualifies for Italy and has been playing for a couple of years now, made it into the World Cup squad. But there's just a venom in the way he carries the ball. And also then for Scotland, I went for Adam Hastings getting his run.
Yeah, they're good selections. I mean, I went with Ronan Kelleher. I think he's going to be the Ireland starting hooker. It's just a matter of time. Ben Earl, like you said, for the same reasons you did, I really thought he might get a chance at number 8. I think he still might with Billy Vunipola out of the tournament. It looks like France are going to go with Romain Ntamack. I mean, they've got 3 quality out halves in their squad. I just really like Jalibert. People might remember him. He did his ACL when Ireland won in Paris in that drop goal game. Another guy back from injuries, Matteo Minozzi, class operator for Italy. Got a big money move to Wasps as well. Nick Tompkins, very interesting story. You know, he plays for Saracens. Mark McCall, the head coach, didn't even know he had a Welsh grandmother. So I think it looks like he's going to play at 13 for Wales this weekend, with George North playing where he should be on the wing. And for Scotland, I went with Jamie Ritchie, who I just think we talked about that bit of dog. I thought he had a brilliant World Cup campaign, and he's a serious operator in the back row. All right, we've less than a minute to go. Predictions for this weekend. It's Tracey versus Tracey. We're going to top this up over the course. This is going to be quick. Wales against Italy. Who's going to win by how many? One-word answers. Wales 20 by 20.
I said Wales 22. Ireland, Scotland.
Ireland by 7.
I said Ireland by 13. France, England.
England by 5.
I'm saying France by 2.
Oh, we've got to, yeah, that's hot, yeah.
All right, we'll return to these next week. We'll be back next Thursday afternoon, 12 o'clock here on offtheball.com and all of our social channels. And of course, we'll have tons of Ireland-Scotland preview and review content over the next few days on all of our channels here on offtheball.com. But until next Thursday afternoon at 12 o'clock, we'll see you then.
The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
American Football 101 on Off the Ball.
With the Aer Lingus College Football Classic.
It's Super Bowl 54 this weekend at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. The New England Patriots and Pittsburgh.